The United States Navy is one of the most prestigious organizations in the world. In fact, no one even comes close to the USA in terms of naval power. But the Navy can be confusing, especially for those who have never served aboard a ship or haven't progressed past the rank of seaman. Today, we unravel this mystery, looking at types of warships, squadrons, and even elite units such as SEAL Team 6. Where do they all fit in? Who do they report to? And who gets the honor of captaining one of the most elite vessels in the world, the USS Gerald R. Ford? We won't be looking at the ranks as we have already done that in a prior video. Make sure to check that out as well. So, let's dive in. The United States military is made up of about 6 branches. These are the U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army, U.S. Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Space Force. Each branch of the military is responsible for its own specific task, with none being seen as more important than the other. When it comes to the Navy, its main specialty is defending American interests in the vast oceans of the world. Its contingents of destroyers, submarines, and most important aircraft carriers are built to not only attack countries such as Yemen, but also provide military support for other missions like aerial raids, often conducted from the flight deck of a United States aircraft carrier. In fact, the U.S. Navy has enough aircraft that would theoretically make it the 3rd strongest air force in the world, only beaten by the actual United States Air Force and the Army. Essentially, the U.S. could theoretically go to war with most nations without even using the Air Force or the Army. But understanding how such a unit operates requires a little more digging, like looking at the various vessels the U.S. Navy can deploy at any given time. Perhaps the most famous is the aircraft carrier. These enormous vessels are better known for being a city at sea, having all the amenities to sustain almost 6,000 sailors for months on end. Within the Navy, there are typically 2 classes of aircraft carriers. This is the Nimitz class, of which about 10 vessels are part of, and then the latest version, the Gerald R. Ford class, which currently only has a single vessel, but more are supposedly on order. The aircraft carrier can bring an entire air force to the shores of the U.S. enemies while packing enough firepower to flatten a city. But it rarely travels alone, and this is where the next one comes in. As of 2022, the United States has about 77 destroyers, with 74 of these being part of the Arleigh Burke class and 3 in the Zumwalt class. Similar to the aircraft carriers, these destroyers pack a hell of a lot of firepower and are generally deployed all around the world. With the latest in modern technology, these destroyers are fitted with the Aegis combat system and play a pivotal role in ensuring U.S. assets, such as the aircraft carriers, are protected at all times. The addition of the AN/SPY-6 radar system, the latest in radar technology, makes it almost impossible to catch these ships off guard, and once crossed, destruction is the only thing awaiting whoever dares mess with the United States. But these all move on the surface. What many people forget is the small weapon of mass destruction lurking beneath. The United States has always been in the lead of submarine development, especially following the rise and destruction of the German U-boat. Nowadays, almost all submarines are nuclear-powered, with the U.S. operating about 71 of these underwater vessels, 53 fast-attack submarines, 14 ballistic missile subs, and 4 guided missile submarines stacked with nuclear warheads. Each of these submarines can operate independently, but is usually also put in what is known as a carrier strike force. These strike forces include 1 aircraft carrier, surrounded by destroyers and submarines. However, frigates also make up a small part of the U.S. Navy. These are mostly from the Cold War, but still offer a lot of value to the carriers, especially in terms of protection. But this isn't the only thing the United States relies on when it comes to the Navy. Aside from this wealth of U.S. power, the United States also operates quite a few additional vessels. Some of these include the previously mentioned frigates, only about 8 guided missile cruisers, and patrol boats. Unfortunately, The Navy doesn't operate any real corvettes, having decommissioned most to be replaced by more advanced vessels that can provide real firepower. But every U.S. naval vessel is operated by a crew, and it is this crew which serves as the heartbeat of the vessel. Unfortunately, they don't get into active combat, which is where various branches of combative soldiers come into play. When it comes to elite military units, the United States once again leads the world. Units such as Delta Force and the Green Berets are some of the very best in the world. But the Navy itself has its own set of highly trained and specialized operators deployed to take down very unique targets. Books have been written about the United States Navy SEALs. Famous operators such as Chris Kyle immediately come to mind when thinking of the U.S. Navy SEALs. These units generally operate in an official capacity, but could be tasked with missions that the U.S. will never admit. They can be deployed to naval vessels from which they operate, while also doing more advanced land and air missions with the help of the Army or the Air Force. Becoming a SEAL is quite a daunting task, requiring years of combat experience and rigorous training, designed specifically to root out the weakest who apply. Unlike the rest of the military, SEALs operate in small teams, and they rarely get into combat if a mission has been successfully completed. For the average sailor, it is extremely tough to make it to SEAL training, which is often reserved for the best of the best. One often overlooked component of the U.S. Navy is the special boat teams. These soldiers specialize in high-speed combat, often operating amphibious assault vessels that are used to work with the SEALs. For example, a group of the special boat team will be deployed to escort a group of SEALs, potentially creating some kind of distraction that could allow SEAL team operators to sneak in and out of enemy territory without being detected. Known as the SWCC, or Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen, these operators are some of the very best in the world and have the latest in naval technology. They often operate patrol boats, used for protecting the coastlines of the United States. But what's even more impressive is the disciplines in which these sailors have been trained. In fact, SWCCs need to be trained in aerial combat, including parachuting. But when you have a boat that can be dropped with a parachute, immediately ready for combat, it completely changes the game. No doubt these individuals are highly trained, but this still pales in comparison to the next unit on the list. SEAL Team 6 is undoubtedly the Navy's answer to the Army's Delta Force. They draw from the best of the best when it comes to other SEAL teams and are usually only deployed for high-stakes operations. In fact, most operations conducted by SEAL Team 6 remain classified to this day. Trained in virtually any element of combat, SEAL Team 6 can be deployed alongside virtually any top-tier unit the United States has. Some of their most notorious missions include taking down Osama bin Laden and saving Captain Phillips, who was kidnapped by Somali pirates. SEAL Team 6 is not your typical Tier 1 unit, which tends to focus on specialized missions. These units often work in highly stressful situations, where the outcome of a mission could potentially save the world, or even lead to World War III. But why is it called SEAL Team 6? Following the establishment of the first SEAL teams in the 1960s, the U.S. creatively named them SEAL Teams 1 and 2. However, the Soviets picked up on this and believed that the U.S. Special Forces didn't have enough manpower. Amid the Cold War, in 1980, the United States added another team of SEALs to their Tier 1 unit list. However, they chose to name it SEAL Team 6 to throw off the Soviets from knowing exactly how many specialized forces the U.S. might have. Nowadays, the name SEAL Team 6 has been dropped, having been renamed to DevGru. However, many military fans and soldiers still refer to them as SEAL Team 6. So, how big is the U.S. Navy actually, in terms of personnel? While the U.S. Navy is not the biggest in the world, it is by far the most advanced. The Navy has around 300 fully operational vessels that can be used at any time, slightly lower than the more than 350 currently operated by China. It has around 330,000 active servicemen, with another 100,000 being reservists. Accompanying these servicemen and fleets are more than 4,000 aircraft, which play a vital role in controlling the skies, especially above fleets patrolling the oceans. Since the United States operates a whopping 11 aircraft carriers, you can be pretty sure that Uncle Sam is keeping an eye on everything happening around the world, with vessels spotted in areas such as the Mediterranean, Red Sea, Taiwan Strait, and even off the coast of Japan. It truly gives the United States a massive global reach that cannot be measured only by the number of vessels. In comparison, China only operates 3 aircraft carriers, 2 of which were bought from the Soviet Union. It has more destroyers and frigates, but when comparing the actual quality of vessels, this is where the real difference comes in. So, how does the United States set up all these vessels to create what is known as a carrier strike force and strike fear in the hearts of their enemies? The flagship of a carrier strike group is undoubtedly the large aircraft carrier that sits in the middle. It is flanked by 2 guided missile cruisers, 2 anti-aircraft warships, and 2 anti-submarine destroyers. But this is only the bare basics. Often lurking beneath the surface is always at least 1 nuclear-powered submarine, and various other vessels like the Royal Norwegian Navy's frigate, HNOMS Fridtjof Nansen, which serves as part of Carrier Strike Group 8, led by the USS Harry S. Truman. Yes, various other NATO countries often send some of their best vessels in support of these strike groups, adding not only another layer of defense, but also a layer of attack into the mix. In fact, the costs associated with an aircraft carrier are so high that the primary purpose of these support vessels is to ensure that the aircraft carrier remains protected at all times. Interestingly, none of these sailors, which could number in the thousands, ever go to bed without food. And once you check out our video on how meals are prepared aboard these vessels, you will quickly see exactly how efficient the United States Navy is. But who is in command of all these vessels? First of all, every large U.S. naval vessel is operated by a person known as the captain. For all intended purposes, this captain is the most important person on the vessel. Whatever they say, goes. But a captain doesn't make decisions by himself. The orders usually come from a flag officer with 1 or multiple stars. In fact, the captain or commanding officer reports directly to the Rear Admiral lower half, who in return reports to the Rear Admiral or Rear Admiral upper half. These 2-star flag officers are usually in command of entire fleets, and they can make bigger decisions about where and how fleets need to be deployed. The Rear Admiral is one of the most senior positions in the United States Navy, but even they have a boss to report to. This is known as the Vice Admiral, who can be employed as a fleet commander or a chief of staff. This is a highly coveted title, being equivalent to the rank of lieutenant general in the military. Vice admirals are usually the leaders of the 3 naval commands, such as the U.S. Fleet Forces Command or commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. This gives them a ton of responsibility, which needs to be reported to the final active rank in the U.S. Navy, the Admiral. The Admiral is a 4-star position, equivalent to that of a general in the Army, and has the biggest responsibility of any other flag officer. There are 6 admirals in the U.S. Navy, 2 of whom work administrative jobs such as the Chief of Naval Operations and the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. This leaves 4 admirals in the field at all times. These 4 active duty admirals also command large fleets, while also focusing on strategic roles that commonly involve discussing with the President and coming up with plans. Admiral William McRaven, the man credited for command of the Bin Laden raid, is a prime example of this. But the U.S. Navy also has a 5-star position, called the Fleet Admiral, which is the highest position available in the U.S. Navy. Their responsibility would be very similar to that of a standard admiral, although this wartime title enables them to command large fleets of ships. The Fleet Admiral is also the one who reports to the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. So, with all this happening in the depth of the U.S. Navy, Does it really look like a force to be messed with? Well, we'd love for you to let us know in the comments. And we'd also like to encourage you to like this video and subscribe for all your Navy content.